So let's say you have now finished basic animation or almost done with basic animation on this, and you're looking, oh, it's not going to show up. You're looking at the assignment, and it spells out that there are things we did in class, right? Made sun, moon, planets, orbit around. We're not doing a play blast, ignore that. Um, but you want to finish that for the homework assignment. However, if you want an A, you're going to want to maybe tinker a little bit more after class. And I have some examples of things that you can do to explore things a little bit further using the same tools that we've used here already. Please don't go adding fire effects or something. We want to stick with things that we were doing, just more of them. But I want to go over some of those things and what I mean by them. So let's go to the right thing. So first up is experimenting with the materials a little bit. So if I grab Saturn's rings and I go to the attribute editor and we go to, there we go, Saturn shader, which I just realized I made the same shader for the rings as I did for the planet, and that's not going to work for what I want. So I'm going to bring up the hypershade, and I'm going to make a new Lambert. I'm going to call it Rings Shader. I'm going to make it a similar color to what Saturn's rings already are. And if I want this to have the material, I right click and hold, I go assign existing material, and I look for one that says rings. There we go. But now, because it's the rings, I can play with something like transparency, and it might actually make a bit of sense. All right. Oh, I can make it more transparent. There we go. Right. So there's nothing that says Saturn's rings can't be transparent, but if you want it to be transparent, there we go. You are going to have to make a separate material, a separate shader. And so I can bring up the transparency. I can also bring up the ambient color, the incandescence a little bit. Oh, no, not incandescence. I hate that. Ambient color. Make them a little bit shiny, a lot more transparent. I want to make this. No, I kind of like that. Right? You can tinker with things like that. You could also, if you wanted, although it makes no sense for planets, but that's okay. If you wanted to try a different shader, stick with anisotropic, Blinn, Lambert, or one of the Fongs. Alright, don't use the ocean shader. But these are shiny. They're not going to look right on planets, I don't think. Especially not the sun. I think Lambert is the only way to go, but if you at least wanted to tinker, try out what some of them look like. Again, a lot of those types are, I mean, try them, but they're gonna, it doesn't do anything because you have to add all sorts of other stuff. Let me see if I can undo. There we go. All right, so tinker with the materials a little bit. Don't go too crazy, but to try, see what happens when you change these settings from just the basic color settings, right? Next up would be to add more moons. So I did not animate Mars yet because maybe I want to add a couple of moons to Mars. So I can, I could easily set it up where I duplicate Earth's moon. Let me actually focus in on the sun. There we go. So I could take Earth's moon if I wanted and make a copy of it and bring it out towards Mars, set it up the same way as Earth. It's just getting a little bit more practice with parenting, a little bit more practice with setting up more complex animation. Most of the planets in the outer system have lots of moons, so go for broke. All right. The third thing is not all the animation needs to be on this exact plane. Right now, they're mostly on the same plane, and that is semi-accurate to our solar system. However, Neptune is like completely out there. It does not rotate in any way that, or it doesn't orbit in any way that makes a lot of sense. So if I want to see how far off this is, I can go to a side view, or this is the front view technically, and I can see, oh dear, well that's a little much. 'Cause, 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 'cause Neptune's off, but it's not way up. But I can give it a little bit more depth to this by shifting it up here. Again, we would need to freeze the rotate. No, I lied. I'm sorry. Don't freeze this rotate because we need it to rotate up and down. Because we're still going to rotate it along the Y. We're not going to rotate it along the Z. So I can go here to the front of this, right click, key selected, and then Neptune's a far out there planet. We only need to rotate it once. Key selected. And what that should look like, yeah. So it's a little bit more complex. Just a little bit of depth, but you could add that if you wanted to. So you basically tilt the Z a little bit to get the things to rotate up and down, but you still put the keys on the Y, right? So you change the Z a little bit to make it off kilter, don't freeze, and then still put your keys on the Y. Again, it's the bigger planets that are far away that are going to do that, not the little planets. They're pretty in sync with each other. And then the last thing is, if you would like, instead of staring into the void of gray, we could actually make a globe, sort of. This is an old school trick for just like giving something a space to be in. So I'm going to make a new sphere. And when I make it, it's inside the sun. So I'm not going to touch anything. I'm just going to grab my scale tool. And I'm going to scale it up, like way up. Like keep going. There it is. Like stupid big. And it's pitch black in here right now, not because it's black. We're going to fix that. Actually, we'll fix it now while it's obvious. So the surfaces we work with are one-sided. So when we are outside, we can see the gray. We can see the lambent. When we're inside, it's not that we're seeing the color black, it's that we're seeing nothing. That's Maya's way of telling you there's nothing here. There's no surface. But we actually want there to be a surface. So we need to deal with something called surface direction, or normals. If you go up to mesh display, normals, one of them is reverse. And when you do that, you've now made the inside of the sphere the side that actually has a surface. And if we were to zoom out here, there's nothingness. You could throw lights on that all day, you wouldn't see it. All right. And now that we can actually see the surface, well, now we can go in and we can go Windows, Rendering Editor, Hypershade. Technically, I don't have to go into the Hypershade, but you should. You should get used to it. Lambert. Space Shader. And we're going to go and just make this like really nifty blue, almost purple. Obviously, space is not that color, but I feel like having fun. And then I click on this and I right click and I say existing material, space shader. That is a terrible color now that it's actually in the program. So one of the things that happens is when you're looking at it in the hypershade and then you're looking at it here, it is not the same thing. So we're going to make that way darker until it's what I want. There we go. The other thing we can do, you can click on all these, drag select, right click, lock. Oh, it's still letting me select it. I'm trying to make it so I can't actually touch it. That would be nice. Let's see if we can go here. Oh, I didn't name this. Oh, for shame. Name it space. I'm sure there's a way to do that. I'm just not remembering. You can with layers, but I don't want to get into layers right now. The other thing you can do if you'd like is you can say show, and all the way at the bottom you can turn off the grid. So if you're tired of looking at that grid and you want to see your animation like properly, there we go. If you click here in the outliner, you'll select nothing. You can see all the things rotating around. And don't feel like you have to be seeing everything all the time, by the way. Things can fly off screen. That's what makes them interesting. All right, so those are the types of things you can do to kind of add to this. More objects, more complex animation, um, and playing with the materials, and maybe adding a background globe. Now, do not work with tools we have not used. Do not add other types of surfaces. Do not add lights. Do not add effects. That will get you no points. I want you to use the tools that we have learned today in class and just do a little bit more with them. Polish this up. And also make sure it really should be under required things, but make sure everything's named. Bring up the outliner. Make sure nothing is called P-Sphere 1. We want to make sure we are labeling things. And don't bite off more than you can chew. I'd rather you just put in a little bit and it's like well done and well polished. That is preferable to trying to throw in everything in the kitchen sink and it gets all a mess. All right? And also make sure. Oh, wait, hang on. Yeah, I know I can't save. Make sure you're saving often. There we go. I hadn't been saving my file, and that's no good. So you want to make sure you're saving your file, and this MA file is what you're going to hand in. I know it is sitting here in a folder somewhere, so if I look for mine, it's called Benvenuto Solar System. I know it's in an entire project folder, and eventually you are going to need to hand in project folders. But for right now, just go to the scenes folder in that project folder, find the MA file that is the one you're handing in, make sure your name is on it, hand that in. Don't worry about project files right now, it will only matter later.